The last speaker is Peter Breggin, who will talk to us from Ithaca in New York State, where he is a practicing psychiatrist. And he is still seeing patients, although he is far beyond normal retirement age. And, well, Peter has published a good deal of books, some very interesting books that have inspired me very much, like Bob Whittaker's books. And he has a weekly radio show that lasts a full hour that I was on recently. That was very nice, just to chat like that. So Peter is very active and knows a lot about psychiatric drugs, far more than most other people I have met. So I look very much forward to this lecture. So please, Peter, now it's you.
I'm going to go right into talking about the scientific basis for what I think life is about and what I think therapy is about. If you look at our biological evolution, 2 or 3 billion years ago, we started walking about on feet, on legs, hominids or early humans. From then until 10,000 years ago, which is nothing, that is for 99.9% of our development, we lived in small groups. We had very, very intimate relationships. The groups are estimated to have averaged around 40 people. So we developed in large extended families and then a few other people who got involved with us as well. And this is probably true all over the world. The men hunted, the women gathered. When when people married, they stayed in the man's family because the hunters were valued. Individual hunter apparently produced more to eat than an individual gatherer. So from the very beginning, we're also in couples, as best we can tell, and we're in families. Now, during this period of time, we were probably nursed for 5 or 6 years because it was nursing on demand. It was the easiest way to feed. There wasn't a lot of chopped up food in jars. So we grew up in intimate contact with our mothers and our whole extended family. It's not that it takes a village to raise a child, which is the common saying. Rather, it takes an extended family to support the mother, who in the early years raises the child. This is our normal evolutionary development. You and I are the end product of a couple of million years of very intimate, highly nurtured living. The odds are overwhelming that we were more nurtured 50,000 years ago and 20,000 years ago than we are now. Way more. There isn't a lot of evidence looking back for a lot of the kinds of madness that we see now, which I believe are pretty much entirely from ruptured human relationships. At the same time, if we now look at the evolution of the infant in terms of this nurturing process, the human brain grows double in size the first year. We are born like the fetuses of other animals. Other animals are not born unable to walk, unable to take care of themselves, unable to do anything. We are. We are in a fetal state for months after birth. And the reason for that, I believe, is because to be who we are, our brain has to grow in response to nurturing. So just mull on that. We are a social brain. We are made of each other, and we evolved that way, not just in our childhood, but throughout 2 million years, building us up. The whole key to emotional stability, to emotional success, in the beginning, we can fix this as we get older, but in the beginning, the whole key is about those early relationships and that long history of being a social creature. Remember, we don't have anything that could have competed with other animals in the way of fur to protect us and keep us warm, or hooves to kick with, or fangs to bite with, or antlers. we had, for those couple of million years, our social relationships. That's how we could kill a mammoth. That's how the women could go out and gather in the fields and protect themselves in the fields. Social relationships. We are all about our social relationships. If we go to the most extreme phenomena of disruption, we call it psychosis. What is psychosis? It isn't anything more in many ways than just the tearing apart of that fabric I've just described. That fabric built over 2 million years, and then the early development, the brain doubling in size in the first year in response to nurturing. It's all about the rupturing of the social fabric. So the individual goes into a state which is separate from other people, which is extremely abnormal for us. The individual goes into what is essentially a nightmare, a falling apart of the social relationships, just leaving us in our raw state, which is not a very good state for us to be in. If we look at that and think more about it, the truth becomes that we heal through relationships. We heal through relationships. Now, when I work with families, I don't actually emphasize that. Let's say I'm working with the identified patient, as we say, and 2 or 3 family members. I don't go back and look at what tore those things early on. That's too horribly painful for the parents involved, or the big brother who was ridiculing and maybe torturing his little sister. Instead, I look at the fact that we are made of each other and that the healing takes place through us regardless of the cause. So I don't start out trying to make anybody feel guilty, and we don't deal with those issues until people want to, which they may not want to. So we're social creatures. All therapy, all help, all religion, all philosophy that's worth anything is going to be about bringing us together and helping us heal each other. I don't know, I didn't get to hear Bob talk, but we often talk about a World Health Organization study that was conducted for the purpose of demonstrating how great drugs are. That's what all the studies are for. And so they compared the third world countries. I don't remember what the name was at the time they were using for that, but they had 2 or 3 non-industrialized nations, and they had 2 or 3 industrialized nations, and they compared the rates of recovery from people with the diagnosis, and I don't believe the diagnosis is a good one, but with the diagnosis of schizophrenia. And they found out that people did much better in third world countries. And this disturbed them so much they repeated the study, and they found out even more so that people did better in third world countries. And the conclusion was they do better in third world countries for 2 reasons. 1, they stop taking their psychiatric drugs right away, or very quickly, or they're not even available. And 2, they have extended families, something which in certainly a country like the United States is a rarity now. Extended families to nurture, keep company with, to be with, to rebuild trust with, to re-cement human relationships with. We have a program in Finland now, which is probably the best therapy program in the world that we know of. It's documented with multiple papers, called Open Dialogue in Lapland. And it simply is family therapy delivered on the spot, in the home, with open-minded, caring people. They really emphasize the open-minded caring, the open discussions. They have a wonderful saying that schizophrenia lies in between the people. And what happens under those conditions is that almost everybody gets better, and almost everybody does it without antipsychotic drugs. And they've been so successful there that they have an 85% complete recovery rate, low 80s, I think, complete recovery rate. return to employment or school. Disability roles are disappearing in Lapland, while they're increasing in the rest of Finland and the rest of the world. So the answer to doing therapy is relationship. Now, I do individual therapy, but whenever possible, I do couples or therapy. I never treat children as if they are sick. I never do anything but emphasize it's up to us as adults to change ourselves to help the child. Now, again, I tell parents, look, many children are unusual. They're difficult. Maybe, I know you did real well with Janie and Johnny's a problem, but the issue isn't, does that prove you're fine because Janie did well? The real issue is, how do we help Johnny? What do we do? How do we change ourselves? I like to call it empathic self-transformation. If you're empathic enough, you will transform yourself to reach to the people you're trying to help, whether it's your loved ones or your clients. If you can, in your private practice, dealing with the most disturbed people, have a family of goodwill, which is not always the case, unfortunately. Human beings can be very much lacking in goodwill toward their own children. But if you have what is in most cases the case, a family of goodwill, where there were early disturbances and maybe continuing ones in communication and love, you can see a young girl, as I have done, who is psychotic at the end of the school year and returns entirely normal in the fall because her parents have found new ways to relate, support, and love the person. And I think we really, in this context, we really, really need to use the word love. I think there is absolutely no way around it. I think that when we talk about communication, it's meaningless. What kind of communication do we mean? We mean loving communication. We mean communication that says, I treasure you, I value you, I care about you, and if you're a member of my family, I will turn myself inside out empathically to embrace you. And that is practically the sum of the wisdom of my lifetime. My goal at Harvard was to, teach at Harvard someday. But in my freshman year, a friend asked me to come out to the local state mental hospital. And when I got there, it reminded me in every way to my Uncle Dutch's description of liberating a Nazi extermination camp. The people were kept in corridors. They were freezing in the winter. They were overwhelmingly stuffy and hot in the summer. They were constantly being abused by the aides. Even the Nazis didn't think of lobotomy on people in the extermination camps, although they did experiment with shock treatment. They called it experimenting. They had good doctors there, right? And I can't tell you why. I didn't come from a very loving background. My parents had their own wounds. But it was really clear to me that there, but for the grace of God, I could have gone. That there was no essential difference between me and the college student I saw crumpled up with feces around them in the corner of the ward. And the more I talked with people, eventually I came to lead this program. A lot was written about us. We became a model program just before the collapse of everything good in psychiatry in America. Because at this time in psychiatry, see, since psychiatry is not a science, it doesn't necessarily move forward. It's more like politics or religion. It can drastically go backward, depending on circumstances and times. It doesn't have a scientific base. It's got a mythological base about biochemical imbalances and brain defects. And back then, by the way, now I'm talking about 1954. I'm going to be 80 at my next birthday. So we're talking about 1954. The theory then was bad brain cells. Does that sound stupid to you? It sounded stupid to me because I was a college freshman. I hadn't gone through years of training to accept authoritarian, stupid remarks. but it's the exact equivalent of the biochemical imbalance, killing bad brain cells. I asked the doctor, how does the shock treatment know where to find the bad ones? Of course, he couldn't answer me. And what makes you think there are bad brain cells? And he couldn't answer me. At one point, I went to the superintendent of the hospital and I said, there's 11 of us. This is written up in the opening of Toxic Psychiatry. By the way, most of you, if you've read anything of mine, have read Toxic Psychiatry, but I've written 15 more books than that. And I think my work's being left behind. But I told them we had 11 students and we had a social worker to supervise us. We wanted our own patients. We had transformed the violent women's ward, painted it, cleaned it up, made it look like a college dorm, you know, with all the kind of things we liked as college students, Gauguin, Matisse. It's probably the same thing in Europe, and, you know, all those painters. And we got the doors unlocked. I had keys. I would unlock the doors. The doors were finally left open. I got keys from the nursing station. After a while, they thought I was supposed to have them. And we were fought by the American Psychoanalytic Association's local group, the most powerful one in the country, the Boston Psychoanalytic. They said we'd ruin the patients. I'd never seen a psychoanalyst in there, and how are we going to ruin patients more than a lobotomy? Well, it turned out we got 8 of the patients out of the hospital. And we all had different methods. Some of us thought we were junior psychoanalysts. I actually took a much more social approach to the person I was working with. I took him for walks. I talked to him. And in a 1 to 2 year follow-up, most of our patients stayed out. We ended up with more than 50% of the patients staying out of the hospital. Some went home. We worked with their families. And all we had was supervision of one wonderful social worker. I believe we could deliver therapy to people very inexpensively if we just gave up the whole system of training and we focused on what people really need to begin with, which is a kind person, an experienced human being, somebody who doesn't take out his problems on other people, somebody who understands boundaries, probably somebody who's raised 3 children successfully. That a person like that could be trained to do therapy, if we selected on that basis of who you are rather than your background, a person like that could probably be trained in 6 months or a year without ever even having to know how to read, by being supervised and role-playing therapy. We used to role-play as college students. Back in '54, we were very inventive. We would role-play how to relate to people. In my entire experience of 4 years in that state mental hospital, I was never hit, never threatened, and I went freely on the violent wards because people saw me as somebody to be trusted. Psychosis, most human suffering, is a failure of trust in other human beings, usually caused by one or another deprivation, neglect, or abuse. And I think we could train people to be therapists, and we'd have to recognize it's not about technique. It's not about cognitive this or whatever, or moving your eyes in a funny way while you remember your painful memories. It's about human beings and making relationships as a starting point. I think the most important thing for a therapist is to treasure the human being who walks into the room with them, to view them as a sacred trust, to think as much of them as of oneself, and to give them the first relationship they've ever had with someone genuinely cared about their interests more than their own. When we love, you know, we actually do care more about the other human being than ourselves. Parents, loved ones readily give up their lives for the lives of their loved ones. We literally care more about the other. Well, in therapy, we can do that because it's very protected. We can actually be there, set aside our own craziness and our own issues, and build a relationship. I'm very fond of saying I can't be crazy because I have to sit with people and pay attention to them, and there's no way to be crazy if you're paying attention to another human being. If you're caring about and loving another human being. I believe that life can be broken down to things that simple. And recovering from all these disorders is a matter of learning to love, maybe for the first time, or maybe again. And the love can be for a couple, it can be for children, it can be for animals. A lot of people love animals in ways they wouldn't dare with people. It could be for nature, it can be for creativity. But through all of my years, I've come to the conclusion that professional success, financial reward, gives a man maybe or a woman security and satisfaction, but not happiness. There's no reason to believe that the head of a big corporation or the leader of a church or anybody else who has a lot of prestige and feels successful is happy. They may feel satisfied and proud. Happiness, I believe, comes through love for each other. And in my practice, I have found that the moment a person decides to become a source of love, the moment they get that straight and they decide, I have that in me, I can love, they start finding people to love them back within 30 days. Because there are other hungry people walking around who want to have loving relationships. And in my therapy, that's what I teach people. If somebody comes in and they're angry and they tell me my waiting room is too small, or I charge too much money, or whatever, I explain to them that I can't be the caring and useful person I want if they're going to make me uneasy. And then this only happens very rarely, because most time people walk in the office, they look around, they get relaxed right away. I wish I could show you the office. But when that happens, I say, no, you're not here to express all your emotions. I said, I'll bet you do that all the time at home. That's part of the reasons you're here. You're here to learn to communicate in a loving way with other human beings. That's what I'm going to help you learn to do. You're going to get the love, the security, and all the things you're missing in your life, because basically we all yearn for that. That's how we're made. We're made to want to love and be loved. That is not unique to us. My dog has a lot of those qualities, but it is by far and away, compared to other creatures, our characteristic. Now, I also do other things in therapy. Sure, I talk to people about how they became injured as children. We look back into childhood, but I always recast it in how it harmed your ability to love life, love other people, connect, and bring out what you have to give to the universe and to the world. So I'm going to take another breath there and ask Peter what he'd like me to do. Is this interesting?
Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, it's just a beautiful connection. I can
Wonderful.
see the room. I'm in church with you, folks. You just heard my sermon.
Wonderful. Peter, one of the things that impressed me so much about you, and I now know other psychiatrists like you who have had a great career, some without using psychiatric drugs at all, and others using them extremely rarely. For example, you once told me that you might use a benzodiazepine if a child had problems sleeping after the mother or father died for a very short period of time. But I have now met psychiatrists from several countries, including an Irishman who became advisor to the government and was incredibly much respected in Ireland. He never used psychiatric drugs. He never used electroshock.
Right.
He didn't. So there are these places in the world where they don't use forced treatment. There are psychiatrists who have done very, very well, practically without ever using psychiatric drugs. What you didn't tell the audience was that these people with schizophrenia that you encountered, these were considered the worst of all people with schizophrenia in the ward.
Hopeless.
And everybody had given up on them. And here you come in with your fellow students, and you're human, and it works. So I think this illustrates so beautifully what psychiatry should be about. And this is why I wanted you to talk to us, Peter.
I just don't start people on psychiatric drugs, and I haven't since I went into practice in 1968. I don't treat people with psychiatric drugs. The other thing is I never locked up anybody involuntarily, ever. Not since my training have I locked up anybody. Now, and I think this is a blessing and a good fortune, because any therapist can have suicides or homicides in his practice, but in all these years now, I've never had a suicide. And I've never had a serious violent outburst on one of my patients. And I think it's because since I don't drug people, I have to give them my cell phone, I have to be available, I have to care about them, I have to think a lot about them, I have to involve other family members if things get desperate. It's kind of like if you have a conflict with somebody and you have a gun, the conflict's just going to get resolved in one way. But if you're unarmed, if you don't have drugs, you can't lock up anybody. They could be in the room for 5 minutes and I can tell they're hallucinating. And I'll just say, I want you to know right away, I never give psychiatric drugs. And whatever you tell me, I'm not going to raise the drugs you're on, because I don't raise the drugs people are on. I want to help you come off, and I'll never lock you up. Now, I'll have to report you if I think you're going to kill somebody, but I think we can work it out before it goes that far. And the relief that comes over people in the first 10 minutes, you can actually see somebody who's hallucinating stop hallucinating because they're trusting you for 10 minutes. Literally. And then I might say, I don't think you've been hallucinating for the last 10 minutes. And then they'll get really frightened, because then the voices come at them and say, don't you talk to him. Because the voices are always almost always the abusers from the past, warning them not to connect to anybody else. So it's not like I've cured the person, but I've shown them in the first session that actually the voices go away when they connect, when they dare trust, and then the voices come back and slam them, because that's the nature of abusers. You make a step forward, they try to destroy you. They don't want you being free. And I'm talking about really severe abuse cases with a lot of hallucinations.
My name is Siri Liltovsen. I'm active in a patients' organization, which is called Aurora, and I'm from Norway. So I know that the next phase you will talk about drugs and the impairment of the brain. So my question or my solution is, or my suggestion about drugs. I think that we should, in all countries that are active in this field, we should go to the politicians, and we should crave that every doctor who should be able to prescribe drugs, they should have a certificate that shows that they have intensely and long studies of the drugs. That will leave out the general practitioner, and it will always also leave out the psychiatrist. So why can't we crave certificates for prescription of drugs?
In my country, the certificates are always in order to have even more power than you had the day before. They're never a learning experience. They're always a trade union experience. I think we'd be better off just stopping them from drugging people. And I think it's going to have to be like the Berlin Wall, where people just stop participating, that at some point there'll be a wave as people see the damage to their loved ones and the culture. I have a more practical and radical approach myself. In a recent journal, you can get this right off my website. It's right at the top of Breggin.com. It's like number 6 in a little list. New article I have out in the European journal, Childhood and Society. I think we should get together and start with asking for a complete ban on giving psychoactive substances to children. Period. And I don't think we should fool around with certifying or you got to have more knowledge. In a debate with a pediatrician, he thought he really had me because he said, well, I only give drugs to 3 out of 100 of my patients. And I said, Doc, I wouldn't know which 3 to poison. I think we have to get tough. We have to say that starting with our children, no drugs. We can't have this gorgeous brain growing, this product of multiple millions. I mean, it's really hundreds of millions of years before we get to the mammals and then to us and the evolution of this brain. Whether or not you think God participated in any way, your brain is the most complex thing in the whole universe. Each of our individual brains is harder to understand than the entire cosmos because life is so much more complicated than the material universe. We have to stop poisoning this incredible organ, at least with our unwitting, helpless children. I think that's a good place to start.